Hi, I'm Ken Hemp, CEO of Answers in Genesis, the Creation Museum in the Ark Encounter, and I'm here at the Ark Encounter with the content manager for our attractions division, Tim Chafee. And Tim and I are going to give you just a little sort of guided tour through a few of the exhibits at the Ark Encounter and just give you some insights into some intriguing information, some of which you might easily miss. And so we're here actually in the Queue Line Gardens area, and there's a 12 Stones monument there. So don't just walk past it. Read the sign, and actually you'll find out that when we opened the Ark Encounter, we had the board of directors lay down 12 stones, and one of those was Dr. John Wickham, who was co-author of the Genesis Flood, who has now passed away and gone to be with the Lord. But this is a great place to get photographs with your family. The 12 stones, based on the 12 stones of Joshua, which was to remind them what, Tim?
All the things that God had done for the Israelites as he brought them out of Egypt and led them through the wilderness, and that, that he was their God, not to chase after the other gods, but for the fathers to tell their children what God had done for them. And in a similar way, we want parents to tell their children what God has done, not just with Noah and the ark, but also through sending his son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross for our sins and rise from the dead.
Actually, getting your photograph here with your family and then in front of the door with the cross on it on the second deck, I think are two of my favorite places so that families can be reminded, just as the 12 stones were to remind the people in Joshua's day, don't forget to tell your children what God has done. Well, here we are under the ark as you leave the Queue Line Gardens. But most people wouldn't think to look up and look at the floor. It's a wooden floor. It's the bottom of the ship, right?
That's right.
But actually, our architects called this the sandwich. And do you know why?
I'm going to guess it's because just above this, we have a layer of concrete that was required for building code. So we have the wood underneath it, and then we have the flooring above it. So
Exactly, and it's a sandwich. And that prefabricated concrete, it's like a runway. When they first laid it down, I thought you could almost land a plane on that.
It's almost big
But
enough.
we had to do that for fire code.
Yep.
So I'm assuming Noah wouldn't have had a big concrete layer at the bottom.
That probably wouldn't help with flotation very much.
But people would look up there and think, oh, it's just the wooden bottom of the ship. But actually, to build a tourist attraction like this, you have to obey the fire codes.
That's right.
So we hid the concrete.
Yep, and Noah probably didn't have those same sort of codes that we do.
I'm sure he didn't. If he did, he'd never be able to get all the animals on board.
That's right.
So Tim, as we walk in the entrance to the Ark, after you come up the ramp and go past Photo FX, and we're going in on the bottom deck into the Ark. Of course, this is not how Noah would have entered. We have the one big door in the side of the Ark. There's a section here that is a great teaching point. Could you explain that?
Yeah, a lot of people will say that there's no way you can build a wooden ship this large and have it float. Well, there's an engineer from Australia that Tim Lovett, who designed the Ark in such a way that it could float. He showed how that's possible. And so what he did is built this mock-up of the hull to show his design. And if Noah would have built it similar to this, it would survive, it would float. You've got a multi-layered hull. You've got some outer layers on the outside, what he calls sacrificial layers, so it would protect the Ark from any collisions that it might have, but they're not structural. The structural ones would be the few that are on the inside and then through here.
And my understanding is some of the ancient ships that he researched had something sort of similar to this.
Yeah, especially with on the outside. It's easier to see on the other side. You can see the mortise and tenon interlocking, which we really show at the Creation Museum as well.
Exactly. Now, don't miss this sign here, artistic license. This is real important because the Bible gives us some details about the Ark and the people involved, but there's a lot it doesn't say, and so we use artistic license throughout the Ark Encounter. Tim, explain.
That's right. In order to flesh out the narrative, in order to help people understand that these were real people, we named the women at the Ark, even though the Bible doesn't give us their names. As far as what the animals looked like, we don't know exactly what they looked like. And how the Ark looked, we don't even know exactly what that looked like. And so we've got some signage explaining that we used our artistic license, or artistic license. And what we did is try to keep it within the biblical parameters. So something that is consistent with the Bible, even if the Bible doesn't specifically say that. So we didn't make the ark way bigger than what it was. We're not using that kind of license.
You could actually look for artistic license that's been applied all throughout the 3 decks.
That's right. And some of the exhibits where we feature it a little bit more, we actually have signage in there telling people that there's a lot of artistic license in this particular exhibit.
Now, as visitors enter the Ark, you'll see the cages there immediately, but don't rush past them. These cages aren't just props. I mean, they're there to represent cages with animals in that Noah would have had on board, but actually they're working cages, Tim.
Yeah, they're functional. And what we wanted to show is how can 8 people care for, just under 7,000 animals, which is probably a little bit of a high estimate of the number of animals. But when you think about it, if you had efficient cages like this, you don't have to feed every single animal every day. You fill this little chute up with food, and that can last for about a week for some of the smaller animals, and this with water, similar to what you might find with your hamsters or your gerbil cages at home. And then as far as cleaning the cage goes, you don't have to get in there, pull the animal, and clean it all the time, because the flooring is made of the same sort of bamboo like this, so the waste can drop through there onto this ramp system that goes all the way down to the bottom, and then all you have to do is scoop out the bottom. And so we've got all of our smaller cages set up this way, just to represent how, if you're using a little bit of ingenuity, you can figure out how to make your job easier and more efficient.
And then on deck 2, look for the exhibit where we show cutaway sections of cages so you can see more of how all this works.
That's right.
Well, as we enter deck 1, you will see animatronic Noah with his family praying as the flood begins. And you can actually hear Noah praying. Mm-hmm. What language is he praying in, Tim?
Well, we don't know what language Noah spoke, but the Old Testament, most of it's written in Hebrew, so we have Noah praying in Hebrew, and if you want to know what he's praying, there's a translation of his prayer there. So that's what we're depicting here.
So if you listen, you'll hear the prayer in Hebrew.
That's right.
Well, as you walk past Noah and his family praying and then walk into the main part of deck 1, the second row of what are called lodge poles right here, these are actually Engelmann spruce.
That's right.
And they come from Utah. They were dead standing trees, and so harvested under forestry license because they were dead, mm-hmm. and we're able to get these. Now these, you can look all the way up there and see how far up they go, but I'm going to show you how big these are. I'll put my... See, I can't get all the way around. Okay, Tim, you're much taller than I am. See what you can do. You can only get to there.
Yeah, well, if I get a little closer, but I can't get all the way around.
See if both of us can make it around. If we put,
I think we can. Let's see. There's your hand. There we go.
And actually, this is the biggest tree, I think, in the whole Ark. Mm-hmm. This is the biggest one right here.
And you mentioned looking up, you can see all the way up. If you just step back into this area, a lot of people will walk right through without ever noticing. But if you just stop and look up, you'll see all the way up to the top of the Ark, and you'll be pretty amazed. And actually, there's a number of places you can do that. So remember that as you're walking through, to look upwards when you see places where you can do that. And you'll get a real good sense of the whole height of the Ark. That's right.
As you walk down deck 1 on the left, you'll see an area here where there are bats. And there's an important reason why we have this particular exhibit, because there's a number of different species of bats. We think there's probably only one kind of bat, mm-hmm. but we allow multiple kinds, which inflates our numbers in regard to the number of kinds allowed on the Ark. But explain that, Tim.
That's right. It's possible there's just one kind of bat. There's a lot of similarities between them, but we couldn't prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt. So we had to separate them out into the 18 different living families of bats, and then there's 5 or 6 extinct families. So we have represented in here 24 different kinds of bats. And because they're flying creatures, and we chose to take 7 pairs of each flying creature, you've got to multiply that by 14. So we have over 300 bats on the Ark, and it's possible that Noah only needed to bring 7. So this is a great illustration of how we might have overestimated the number of animals, just to show that even with that higher number, they can fit in the Ark.
And if we could actually have documentation to show that they all interbreed, then they're all of one kind.
That's right.
And that's what we're missing.
Yep, that's right.
But could be just one kind.
Mm-hmm. We're
at the bow end of the Ark, and we're on the first deck. And this is a cutaway model of the ark that took 6 months to build, and quite a number of people involved in this, and one main person. And you'll notice that the cages and the jars look exactly like the ones that we have in the ark. And this is meant to show how Noah could have actually loaded the ark, because millions of people have come through this ark, so it has to be set up for guests to be able to walk through, and we obey fire codes and all that sort of thing. But this shows you how it could have been loaded.
That's right. You mentioned that it took a long time we had one person working on it. You know, he was so dedicated to it. Right before we were opening, before the ribbon cutting, I was upstairs helping to install an exhibit, and I asked the guy, I said, hey, can you go down to the opening and grab this for me? And he said, just so you know, if I do this, this will be the first time in over 6 months that I've done anything except for the half ark model. So that's how dedicated he was.
That's how dedicated he was.
Yeah.
And here we also have a signage telling people how many kinds we think were on the ark, but that's way overestimated.
Yeah, like we were explaining with the bats, it's probably an overestimation because we're trying to be on the safe side. And so if you're wondering if your favorite animal was on there, well, there's a list of every single one of them over there. And this ark is designed to show how every one of them could have fit on there. And what we discovered, and I think we would expect this, the ark actually is the right size to fit all the different animals, all the food that they require, all the water needs, and everything else. Everything fits just right.
Even with a worst case scenario figure, 1,398 animal kinds, you could fit all the animals needed on the ark.
That's right.
Now, as we're walking up the first ramp to the second deck, don't miss what's on the left-hand side. As you look down, what do we see down here, Tim? All the way up here, there are all sorts of props.
Yeah, so we've got different tools or simple machines that Noah and his family might have used to help them in what they were doing. So this one is actually a rope maker. It's functional, so you can take some of these different strands and combine them. We've got a peg making machine, which we've seen the pegs in the siding of the ark and how they put things together with the mortise and tenon. So just a lot of different props that they might have used while they were constructing the ark.
And people can get so excited coming here to see the ark walking up the ramp, they don't look over there and actually see all that. And actually, they're working props.
That's right. And a lot of times it's because they're looking up here, which we don't want to take that away too. I mean, make sure you're looking at this, you get to see the structure. And when you're in the ramp, that's one of the best places to do that.
We're now on the second deck, and as we're walking along the second deck, we come across the restrooms. Now, there are restrooms on each deck, first deck, second deck, third deck. Why would we stop at the restrooms? Well, first of all, we have male and female restrooms because we believe in two genders, right, Tim?
That's right. Just God made them male and female.
Exactly, Genesis 1:27. But the restrooms are actually in a tower. In fact, there are 3 towers that the ark is anchored to, and you put all those towers together, they're about the size of a 200-room hotel. Not only do they house the restrooms and sort of keep them out of the ark itself, but also 4 lots of exit stairs. Each one of those exit stairs is sort of like stadium stairs. They're massive for fire escape and so on.
That's right. You don't get to see the towers at all from the front, but when you're in the zoo, when you go to the zoo afterwards, if you look back at the ark, you can see those 3 towers and how massive they are.
And that's why when people say to me, would the ark float? I say, not this one, because there are massive holes in the side where the towers are connected.
That's right. Building codes again.
Building codes again.
I mean, who needs restrooms?
We're now walking through the pre-flood exhibit and all the beautiful artwork on the wall. There were some secularists who put together a supposed documentary that was shown on PBS, and their geologists mocked at us having dinosaurs on an altar being sacrificed. Tim, are these dinosaurs?
No, they're not dinosaurs. And we talked about this when we went through the Creation Museum as well. They're the members of the goat sheep kind, but I think a lot of people are confused. They don't recognize that they're skinned animals, because here we have Adam and Eve, they're not wearing anything. Now we see Eve after this, she's wearing something made of wool. Obviously that didn't come from dinosaurs. And as a ministry, we've always presented the animals that were sacrificed, that first sacrifice that God did, because he made coats of skins for Adam and Eve. We've always represented that as members of the goat sheep kind. The Bible doesn't say what it was, but it would be a great picture of the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, Jesus Christ, who died, in our place. So this is that first sacrifice that God did for Adam and Eve.
So if you skinned the sheep, goat kind, they would look something like this.
They would look pretty similar to this. And this is stylized artwork as well, so that might throw people off a little bit. But we've got a whole article on our website all about this. I mean, even from back in the 90s, we were presenting this as the goat sheep kind, and we've done that. It's gone through various renditions, and you can see that on the website, different artwork that we've got that always depicts it as that.
As you walk through the pre-flood exhibit, you'll see 3 really exquisite dioramas, and they're representing, you know, the violence, the nastiness of that world. The decadence before the flood. We had to be careful how we represent it.
We got to do it in a family-friendly way, which is tough.
Well, I wanted people to look at something here. Look at Tim, okay? And then you see this one here? It looks just like him because Tim modeled for this sculpture.
That's right. They said they needed a giant, and well, who do you think they call?
But you didn't model in that clothing.
No, I had a pair of shorts on. They did take away some of the muscle mass. It just wasn't believable, you know, so they had to slim me down.
Of course.
Of course. But he's pretty handsome.
And actually, there are others of Answers in Genesis staff represented in here, but we won't go through all those and embarrass them.
Yeah, and you see that throughout the rest of the dioramas as well. And even in the artwork that you see throughout here, a lot of us did pose in certain things, and then the artists used that.
And it's important for mums and dads to explain to their children what the world was like before the flood. I mean, the thought of man's heart was evil continually, the Bible says. So we want to represent that, but we have children here as well.
There's a fine line to walk, and it's really hard to figure out, did we go too far? Did we not go far enough? And you get complaints from both sides. Oh, you should have made it a lot worse because the world was a lot worse. But then other people say, you've already gone too far. And it's just it was a tricky line to walk.
But you probably see a lot worse on television these days.
I agree. Well, Ken, here we are on deck 2 still. We've just come out of the pre-flood world exhibit, and now we're getting to see a lot of the larger cages that have some of the, you know, the bigger animals. People always wonder how could they fit them. But one thing we don't want people to miss as they're here and as they're walking on the other side, each member of Noah's family is represented once per floor. So we saw them all at the prayer scene on the first deck. And in this deck, it's a little harder to find them. But you can see Shem's wife up there on this mezzanine or this catwalk because she's going over to dump some food into these chutes for these animals. And if you look over on that side, you can see Shem up on another catwalk, and the rest of them are scattered doing different working scenes that day.
Hey, that'd be a great thing for the family to do. Look for all 8 characters on each deck.
That's right.
And see if you can find them. The other thing you'll notice in the cages, there are some animals you may have never heard of before because our artists and sculptors wanted to represent some of the extinct animals that we're not familiar with. So you're going to see some very unique creatures.
That's right, those that have gone extinct since the time of the flood that would have been on the ark.
Now, as you walk along the second deck towards the bow end, there are many themed exhibits, and it's easy just to look at them and say, wow, that's fantastic, and move on to the next one. But there's a lot of teaching points within each of the exhibits. And of course, here you can meet animatronic Noah, and you'll hear him talking, and you can ask him questions, and there's also sounds from the animals and so on. But Tim, run us through this exhibit and point out some of the interesting things we don't want people to miss.
That's right. If you ask him all of the different questions, he'll point out some of the things, but not everything. So for example, we've got a globe here that shows one continent, which is what we believe there was prior to the flood. And you'll see that represented in maps in the next exhibit as well. So we've got different scrolls here. In fact, he's writing something right now while he's there. So if you ask him what he's doing, he'll tell you what he's working on. He's talking about how the world was so wicked. So we're saying they were writing
before the flood?
That's right. Yeah, people were intelligent, and
even back to Genesis 5:1, this is the book of the generations of Adam?
If that's how we're supposed to interpret that he wrote that, I mean, it could have been written about him. But either way, I mean, they were intelligent people that could write. We've got actually pictures of Lamech and Methuselah, so Noah's father and grandfather, and these were actually drawn by your nephew. And,
my nephew David.
Yeah, your nephew David, and he didn't draw just these ones, but also the ones that you see in that one in the Answer Center of you and your wife Mallory. It's exquisite, that photorealism that he does.
Yeah, if they look in the Answer Center in the middle lobby, they'll see that my nephew David actually did this painting of my wife and I. It looks just like a photograph. Yeah, he's amazing.
Amazing. Yeah. So we've got different props that are here. Of course, you see the dove and the raven, which will come into play later on in the narrative. Some of the cages and scrolls that you see throughout. So a lot of different props here. You got Noah's wife back here as well, and he'll even interact with her a little bit if you ask the right questions.
So actually, you could spend a bit of time here looking at all the different objects that we see in here.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, here we are in Noah's library. There's a lot to this. Don't just look at it and then walk on. Explain some of the things that we see here.
Yeah, each of the elements, just like the last exhibit where we saw Noah writing, the exhibit designers think through all of these things, trying to figure out what can we put in there that guests might be able to study and look at. Yeah, so over here we've got the wooden figures that are detailing the account of Adam and Eve and of course the forbidden fruit that they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So you see that depicted in these wooden figures. And then over here you've got the genealogy from Adam all the way to Noah, and that's written in Noah language. And what we've got throughout the ark, you see little notes from Noah or his family members back and forth to each other. Over on this end, you've got really each of the chapters of Genesis 1 through 6 up to the flood. If you pay close attention, you see the 6 days of creation, you see the fall, you see Cain and Abel, and go all the way down to the time of Noah. And then we've got some of the scrolls here. You've got clay tablets down here, different wooden figurines that Noah might have carved. Our story that we've got, our backstory of Noah, has him as a woodworker, a carpenter or a shipbuilder from a young age.
And that's just a little further down, the Who Was Noah exhibit.
That's right. That gives you a little bit of the backstory of how he could have acquired the skills he had. So actually, what I did is I wrote a trilogy called the Remnant Trilogy of 3 historical fiction novels about Noah. And so if the information that you see throughout the ark, if it's not straight from the Bible, it's coming from that series. So if people are wondering, where do we get the names for the women and why do we have them doing these things? So that we had one consistent narrative throughout that the designers could work with. And that was the main reason for doing it.
And who invented Noah writing?
That was actually one of our graphic designers. James De Leon did that. And what it is, it's basically just English, but flipped right to left. And then there's also a character in there for the space. So there's 27 figures plus the numbers. And you could take that, you get a little key for it, and you can translate everything in here. It all makes sense.
So that's amazing. So it's not just someone scribbling.
That's right.
On that.
Yeah, so if you've got a kid who really likes puzzles and everything, they can interpret everything. In fact, what you see right here, there's a creature called Thylaca smilus. It's got some fangs that kind of look like a saber-toothed cat. It's not one. But here there's some writing in a different color and it's written at a different angle. If you translate it, it says, watch out for sharp claws. And the reason for that is in the story that I wrote, not the biblical account. Ham has a scar right here from one of those, and you can see that on the character of Ham on the different decks. And it's because of one of these creatures that got him. So we've integrated a lot of different things, and if you check out the novels, you'll see those.
I didn't even know that about Ham.
And that's,
well, there we are.
he got the same name.
Things. Yeah. Tim, when you and I look back on our lives, we can see how God used our experiences, the training, all of that to prepare us for the ministry He has called us to be involved in.
That's right.
And you're saying the same's true of Noah.
I would think so. Yeah, a lot of people wonder what Noah did before the flood. Well, what if he was already a shipbuilder? And a lot of people don't think about it that way. So that was the backstory we presented for Noah in this exhibit called Who Was Noah? How could he have acquired the skills that he obviously had to build the ark? And we mentioned that we're using artistic license here. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly what he was doing, but we know he was a preacher of righteousness, but he probably wasn't an itinerant preacher making a living. I don't think people would have made a living doing that in those days. The world was so wicked. But we know he was skilled to do what he did. God's not going to call somebody who doesn't have an idea what they're doing, or at least give them the ability to do it. So what you see when you go through this exhibit, anytime you see what looks like parchment on the sign, that's right from Scripture. And then the other things are elements that are part of the artistic license that come from that backstory that I talked about before.
Tim, what's the name of this exhibit?
This is called the Fairy Tale Ark.
Do you know what I call it?
Bathtub Ark.
No, I call it What Not to Teach Your Children.
Okay.
Because the bathtub ark is how the ark is represented in most children's books, most Christian children's books dealing with the flood all around the world.
Yep.
And that teaches kids that the ark couldn't fit all the animals on board. It would have sunk real easily. We want people to understand the real ark didn't look like the bathtub ark.
That's right. This turns it into something more like a fairy tale. So even though people may have good intentions when they're doing those things, it really is dangerous to be presenting the biblical account as something that couldn't have happened.
And I encourage them to read this book that's opened here before you called The 7 Ds of Deception. Well, Tim, here we are at the most photographed part of the ark inside the ark.
Besides
it's the door.
my character.
Besides your character in the pre-flood exhibit,
That's
yes.
right.
It's the door, and has a cross on the door.
That's right.
And the interesting thing is that cross, it's subtly lit with light, but it shows up more on your smartphone when you take a photograph than it does in real life. And because of that, you've got an interesting story.
Yeah, we get people that will email us and say, you know, we never noticed it when we were there, but when we looked at our pictures or when we got it developed, you know, we noticed there's a cross up there. Was that a God thing, or was it really there? And of course, it's hard to send them an email and say, sorry, it was just the light that we
They thought it was a miracle. You go home and a cross appeared on the door.
Right.
But I love to see families getting the photograph taken at the door here. It's a reminder, as Noah and his family went through a door to be saved, we need to go through that one door to be saved.
That's
the
right.
Lord Jesus Christ.
And like the 12 Stones exhibit, it's a reminder to tell people to teach your children and pass that on to them.
So get a photograph of you and your family at the door and at the 12 Stones in the Queue Line Gardens. Now, as you walk up the ramp from the second to the third decks, don't miss looking over to the right at the mezzanine and seeing all the cool stuff.
That's right. We wanted to theme out the entire Ark, and so what you'll see is some of the supplies that they might have used to help load the Ark, or just different things that they would have had at any time during the construction or while they're taking care of the animals here in the Ark.
And what we're pointing out to you, actually, if you take a bit more time and look around, you'll see all sorts of interesting things.
Right, yeah, it wasn't just do the exhibit, it was theme the whole Ark and get people to look around and see how much thought went into each of these.
Now, Tim, this is one of my favorite places in the Ark. Of course, I've got many favorite places.
Yeah.
In fact, everywhere is my favorite place. But this is one of my favorite places, where between the second and the third deck, halfway up the ramp, and if you stand right here and you look down towards the bow end, and then you look down towards the stern end, you get a sense of actually being in a ship, and you're about midship.
That's right. You get a good idea of how massive the Ark is, and then you can look up here and see towards the top as well, and you can look down there, and you can see some of the props that we were talking about earlier, and you really get a good sense for how huge this vessel is. And
I love to just stand here, and you sort of get a sense we're in a ship, and you can imagine the cages, the animals, and all the activity going on in the Ark. Well, Tim, we're in the living quarters on the third deck.
Yep.
It's one of my favorite places in the Ark. Did I tell you I have a lot of favorite places in the Ark?
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite places in the Ark. It's absolutely stunning. And don't miss that Shem's wife is making a vegetarian meal, and of course there's signage there to tell them why that is so, because we didn't eat meat until after the flood if we obeyed God's word.
That's right.
But what we wanted to look at was Noah here with the dove. And I've had people say to me, but that's not a dove, it's not white.
Yeah.
Tim, can you explain?
Yeah, because what we're representing are the kinds that were on the Ark, and the dove and the pigeon and some other birds as well all come from the same kind of animal. So what we're representing is what that may have looked like at that time. Of course, we see it in the storybooks and everything. We always see it as a white dove because we think in terms of the present.
Species today.
Yeah, and what we need to be thinking about is what it might have been like at that time.
So the kind divided into different species after the flood.
That's right.
And so white doves come after the flood. The Ice Age exhibit is very significant. There's a lot of backstory to this too. When I first debated Bill Nye at the Creation Museum, February 2014, it was interesting. He brought up ice cores as an example of supposed millions of years, and I brought up an example of planes in the ice, which you can talk about here in a second, and we have an exhibit on that in the Ice Age, showing that it doesn't take millions of years. After I did that debate, I was immediately interviewed live by CNN right there at the Creation Museum with Bill Nye. Piers Morgan was the interviewer at the time, and the first question he asked me was, why don't you believe in climate change? I mean, climate change wasn't even mentioned in the debate.
No.
Why don't you believe in climate change? And I said, I do believe in climate change. There's been climate change since the flood.
Yes.
Well, when Bill Nye came to the Ark and I took him through all three decks and we recorded it, it's known as the second debate.
That was the second day after we opened.
Second day after we opened, and he wanted to start up here because he thought we were denying climate change. So do you want to explain a little bit about this exhibit?
We actually have a sign about that. Is man responsible for climate change? And we show how over the last 2,000 years that the climate has fluctuated. It's gone up and down a little bit. You've got the little ice age, you've got the medieval warm period, we're not denying that the climate changed at all. And in that, he goes right to that and he says, this is what makes me really angry. He didn't even bother to read the sign.
Right.
What we're asking is, why did it change so much before the Industrial Revolution? Because they would say it's all man-made climate change, and we would say it has probably more to do with the sun, that really warm thing in the sky.
There's been dramatic changes before the Industrial Revolution. I mean, the Sahara Desert used to be lush.
Yeah.
That wasn't, Egyptians running around in chariots that were motorized or something.
Yeah, and we've also, you mentioned the plains in the ice. So we've got a diorama in there showing what's known as the Lost Squadron. So in World War II, some of the planes were forced to set down because of a storm, and they landed on the ice in Greenland. And after the war, they thought they could go dust them off and fly them home. Well, they couldn't find them. And it wasn't until the 1980s that somebody discovered them. They were 250 feet beneath the surface. And it's not because they sank down, it's because that's how much snow and ice covered them. And they were all these layers.
They were 3 miles from the original location as well. And actually, I use that example in the debate at the Creation Museum with Bill Nye, and we have a little video excerpt of him and I in that debate discussing that topic.
That's right. And in that debate, you had like 10 seconds to respond because he threw so many things in that little, you don't have time to rebut everything. So here we got a chance to give more detail. And if people are interested in that, in fact, Glacier Girl, one of those planes, they actually went down and pulled it up piece by piece. They put it back together and they used to fly it around to different air shows. It was called Glacier Girl. And there's a research team going out there, I think this year, where they're gonna try to bring another plane up.
Interesting. And that plane, Glacier Girl, is in a museum now.
And it used to actually be housed in Kentucky too.
I think it's in Texas now.
I think so.
We're on the third deck in the Rainbow Covenant exhibit, and here's an interesting painting representing aspects of Genesis, and it was done by an artist in Mexico, although he's here at the Ark now, and he does painting. And people can see that absolutely exquisite. But there's an interesting backstory to this. So, Tim, do you want to tell us what happened?
His name's Oscar Nava, and he's just a brilliant artist. And he painted this piece while he was in Mexico City, and his wife helped him as well. And they said, well, you got to make it look like this monument that was found in the ground. So you got to stain it. And he didn't want to because it was so vibrant and
he made this beautiful painting, and then he had to ruin it, right?
Right, and he sent them pictures and said, please don't ruin it, and don't make me do that. And then they said, no, it has to. And he took more pictures, but can't you see? Please don't do it. And so ultimately, that's what they did. And but what it is, it represents everything from if you could say, the Noah account. So you can see here's the sacrifice after the flood. You get the 40 days and 40 nights of the heavy rainfall being represented there. Summer and winter, springtime and harvest, those things will not cease. And if you look at all the different individual pictures, you can see different elements from those 3 chapters in the Bible.
So basically, Genesis chapter 7, 8, and 9. So people can look at this and look at all the elements of Genesis 7, 8, and 9 represented here, and think about how beautiful a painting that was, and then they had to make it look like it was aged and a dug-up artifact.
Yep, and one little fun bit about Oscar, I think we can share this. His wife was actually due with their little girl, the day the Ark opened, and she ended up giving birth a few days earlier, and she named her daughter Emsara, which is what we named Noah's wife. They got it from that. So.
Well, there we are. We're in a big exhibit at the bow end of the Ark on the third deck. It's called Searching for Truth, but it's really why the Bible's true. And when you walk through here, it's a graphic novel presentation of the gospel, but there's a special video in here, and I call it the Bean video.
Yep, that's what we call it, the Bean video.
Not Mr. Bean.
No.
It actually stars Mr. Chafee, Mr. Tim, and you wore the same shirt today in honor of this video.
That's right. Yep.
Explain the video. Don't miss the Bean video. It's incredible.
So this is a representation of the different manuscripts and fragments that we have for the New Testament compared to the different manuscripts and fragments that we have for some of the other books of antiquity like Caesar and Herodotus. And so people will say, well, we can trust what those guys say, but they don't trust that we have the New Testament writings.
Right.
And that we can't really know what was originally written, but the evidence is overwhelming as far as the manuscript evidence we have for the New Testament versus those other ones. So this is what this is meant to represent. Each bean represents one manuscript or fragment.
So what did you do with all the coffee beans after you filmed that?
I wanted to reuse them, but those AV guys stuck their hands in them and started to redo it. So they ruined it. So they actually put them in bags, and then some churches used them, out in the, not to make coffee, but
to drink.
for elements.
Okay. We're here on the third deck, and this is the last series of signs you will see, the last exhibit, basically, if you've walked through everything, you know, in order.
Right. Yep.
And then you go down the ramp or the elevators down to the gift store underneath. And this is teaching a little bit of apologetics in regard to, can we trust the Bible? So it's great to go through all these signs.
And it relates to what you just saw on the exhibit. So what they're looking at on their screens when you read through the story that we've got there, this is what they're seeing on each of those different things.
So it relates to the graphic novel presentation of the gospel. So, but this ribbon up here, it looks like it's got Hebrew on it. What is this, Tim?
So what we did is we took the biblical account of the flood, beginning all the way down there on the top with Genesis 5:28, where it starts talking about Noah. And then as far as we could take it through the flood account, that's if somebody knows how to read Hebrew, they can come up here and read parts of the flood account.
Oh, so let me have a look. Oh, and Noah did everything God told him to do. Wow.
Genesis 6:22, right?
Thank you for joining me on this exclusive look at some interesting behind-the-scenes features at the Ark Encounter. Now be sure to check out our Things to Do and Events sections on the Ark Encounter's website. We're looking forward to your visit.